All right, welcome everyone to our DSAP Fall Speaker Series. This is our second Fall Speaker Series, and tonight we will be talking about advocating for your child with an IEP in school. And in this presentation, our speaker, Diane Perry, she will explain the process and strategies for educational advocacy, discuss effective ways to collaborate with your IEP team, identify dispute resolution options, and listen to your questions. She has over 20 years of education, advocacy, and family leadership under her belt. She is the Family Resource Specialist for the PEAL Center in Philadelphia. In addition to her work at PEAL, she serves as a member of the State Special Education Advisory Panel, and she's a parent. Her son David is 30. He has received special education services. He recently graduated college. He's working part time, and he serves on 2 boards. So, Diane will be sharing with us about David as well. So, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for outreaching to the PEAL Center to bring you this topic this evening. In addition to David, who navigated the special education system, he also happens to have Down syndrome. So I have that relationship with this group here this evening. And he always gives me permission to share whatever I would like to share. And I always like to give him kudos because he gave me my career and the work that I do, because I knew nothing about disability till he was born. So with that, let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Now, I want to thank any of those who are here this evening who submitted questions ahead of time. A few of them I will be addressing as I go through the PowerPoint, but there'll also be some time at the end also for me to address the ones maybe that I didn't get to specifically. And then, of course, I welcome any other questions as I go through the presentation this evening. If something is burning and you want to pop something in the chat, I can try and get to it, but I want to make sure I give you all this information as well. So I might just say, I'll hold that off to the end or whatever, but, or if we get into a conversation, I might need to like pause that for a minute. Because there's all kinds of good stuff that I want to share with you tonight. So let me tell you a little bit about the PEAL Center. If you're not familiar with us, the PEAL Center is the PTI, the Parent Training and Information Center in the state of Pennsylvania. In IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, every state must have a PTI. And in Pennsylvania, the PEAL Center is your PTI. So if you happen to move to another state, you can always look up the PTI and they would be doing the similar work that we do here in Pennsylvania. Our mission at the PEAL Center is to educate and empower families to ensure that children, youth, and young adults with disabilities and special health care needs lead rich, active lives as full members of their schools and communities. And my role at the PEAL Center is I am a family resource specialist. And what that means is that I do individual assistance with families, helping them navigate the special education system, understanding their rights, the processes, forms, anything that has to do with special education. And we have I have many other colleagues who do all various activities throughout the state, particular with special healthcare needs. We also have a couple of youth coordinators that do some various activities. We have family and youth leadership institutes. So we do a whole host of things. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to show you our website and go over that a little bit with you as well to help you navigate that. So Masha, did I say that right? Masha or Masha?
Masha, you got it.
Masha, okay. Masha already kind of gave you the points that I'm going to be covering this evening. So let me start off with the principles of advocacy. Let's start there. So parents can learn how to advocate And there are also volunteer advocates. There are paid advocates. There's all kinds of flavors of advocates out there, so to speak. It is important for the family to learn how to advocate for their children, but some families may need assistance from a professional advocate. Families can advocate in the healthcare system, the educational system, and in the community. So advocacy comes in many different forms, and it can happen in many different ways as well. And I'm going to go through some of those and how you can navigate all that as I go through the presentation tonight. But truly, educational advocacy starts with the family. Even if a family has an advocate working with them, families always lead the way. Your voice is very important to the whole process, and you are part of that process, and it's in the law. Families need to be informed decision makers. That's what it says in the law. And that's what I base a lot of my work on as I'm working with families as well, ensuring that they know that their voice is important. You're invested in your child's life for a lifetime. And so what you bring to the table, even though we have all these professionals around the table, it's very important. So when I'm working with families, I'm always, offering to them and giving them that encouragement about their how important it is for them to be part, that they are part of that team. They are part of that IEP team. And on occasion, sometimes, might not feel that way. I know I felt that way sometimes as I navigated and went to many IEP meetings for David. But that's where sometimes you do bring an advocate or you bring a couple friends. I remember one IEP meeting, I think I might have had at least the same amount of people on David's side as it was the professional side. So it was a pretty big group that day. But there was a reason for that. So sometimes you do need to pull in more people into the meetings. So why is it important for you to advocate? Well, parents do bring their own valuable experience with their child to the table, no matter how old the child is. Now, as children get older, though, the PEAL Center and me personally do support families in ensuring that their voice comes to the table, that they are part of that IEP, that they're giving information for the team to best help them. So, you as a parent get to decide and work that out with your child about when you feel that it'll be a good time for them to participate. But their voice is just as important as your voice. And even before David started going to his meetings, I did always have a conversation with him about different things about school, just trying to find out from him what might help him best. What doesn't he like about school? What does he like about, those kinds of things to help guide me to better support him as well. Professionals have a lot of knowledge and expertise in specific areas, and they really bring that all to the table. But they're only a temporary part of your child's life. You have to remember, you got them for your whole life. They only have it a snippet. They only have your child for a snippet of their life. So it's really important, again, that your voice is at the table. Professionals will pass in and out of your child's life, but you will always be the parent. Professionals deal with many children, but you only have your child to think about. So sometimes you'll hear, oh, well, we don't do that. We don't do that with this child or that child, or, I have to do this for they always want to bring in, various things about other children. And, we always need to bring it focused back to your child. That's nice that they have to do all that, but we're here to talk about my child today. And actually the family is really the only one that can really make that happen. No one else can. So your advocacy, it really can make a difference, both for your child and others, because sometimes you are breaking down other barriers depending on your what you're advocating for. And a couple of the questions that had come in, did kind of talk about, the educational placement of their child and what they're advocating for, and inclusion, and what does that look like for your child, and how can we balance that out as far as, being in the general education, classroom with their peers, how is the school accommodating for your child? So, there's all kinds of resources out there, and it's in the law. What I will say is it is in the law that every child has the right to be educated next to their typical peers with the supports and services. And the school district must exhaust all supports and services before removal of that child. So it's very important that your child gets all those supports and services in the general education classroom before they even remove them, whether it be into another classroom or if they're suggesting another school or anything like that. So it's very important to know the law, and it does support you in those decisions, because some of the questions kind of that you guys submitted is around some of that. So, and I'll talk about some of that as I move forward. But in order to really talk about inclusion and really advocate for that, your vision is what's going to drive that. And I don't know if many of you are understand what a vision is. I'm going to give a little bit more detail on that, but it is very important that your team know what your vision is for your child. And as they get older, because I know there's a varied group here, but as far as ages, as your child gets older, it's important for them to share their vision. And when my David started in high school, he did a PowerPoint. So your children can share their vision. It can share at a we call it student-led IEPs, and no matter how they communicate, so David did best with a PowerPoint. Some students may need to do a videotape. Maybe you're recording them before you go to the meeting. Maybe you're asking them questions and they answer the question. So there's various ways of communication that all our children can communicate, and then also share that vision. And that's what it really drives that, toward what those supports and services are going to look like for your child. When you're creating that vision, you're kind of creating it for your family. I always started David's vision with David will be a tax-paying citizen, because we had high expectations of him, and we expected everybody else to have high expectations of David. And sometimes, navigating in this world, knowing, you're in the Down syndrome community, you may or may not have experienced this, but we have experienced that, they see a child with Down syndrome, some people put limitations on them already because of maybe, old school thinking or whatever, and there's so many opportunities out there now, for not only our children, but all children with disabilities. And I had shared in my bio that David graduated from college. He did participate in one of those higher inclusive education programs. So, and there's all kinds of other opportunities too, even if it's not college. But there is, I will share this PowerPoint, and Masha, you'll be able to share the PowerPoint. Yeah, okay, good. And I'll be sending some of the other things that I'll be referencing as far as handouts. I'll send them to Masha as well, and she can share them with everybody. Because at the PACER Center, which is on here, the PACER website, there's something called the Student Snapshot. And that Student Snapshot is kind of a guide to help you develop a vision and what you can bring to the table, so that you can share that with your IEP team. And people have shared their visions in many different ways. So I would, sometimes I had a picture of David on there. Sometimes after the IEP meeting, I would do thank you notes. David and I would do thank you notes, and I'd have a picture of him on there, doing it that way. The vision, I would print them out, and sometimes I just handed it out to everybody. And sometimes I read it. It really depended on my mood and what I was advocating for at the meeting. If I felt emotionally stable enough to read it, I would read it. Otherwise, I would just, share it with them. So it really depended what we were talking about. But, it was important for David's team to presume competence of him and to have those same high expectations that we had for him. So there's different approaches that you can do to have successful advocacy, because a lot of times, we're frustrated, right? A lot of times you're looking for an advocate or you're asking about advocacy because there's frustration. So how do we move from that frustration to, effective advocacy? And when you're trying to bring your voice to the table, and you feel like you're not being heard, how do you navigate that? How do we do that? So, and sometimes, you might feel, different types of emotions, like, some people might feel some type of an aggression or sarcasm. I'm a big sarcastic person. I know over the years I made some comments that probably weren't so nice at meetings that were sarcastic, and I had to learn how to apologize for those so that we can continue working as a team. But that's how I learned to advocate, right? It's making some of those mistakes, acknowledging it, and trying to move on and being a team member. But so there are just some of the ways that we can learn to do effective advocacy strategies. I'm going to get into communication and what that could look like a little bit further into the presentation as well. But sometimes, it's all about making sure that we're communicating clearly. Many times people call the PEAL Center, and when I'm talking to them, it's because there is a breakdown in communication. The district is saying something, the parent is hearing it this way, and it might not even be what's being said, and vice versa. The parent is saying something, the district is interpreting it this way, and it might not be what you really mean. I remember many times I was at a meeting and I would say things and then they would take it and I'd be like, that's not what I said. That's not what I mean. So sometimes it's just that breakdown in communication, and we have to figure out ways that we can get back on track to figure out what's the best way to move forward. And sometimes that, does reflect positions versus interest. There is a video through what's called Cadre Works, and I'll send the link to that video that you can watch it. I'm not going to show it tonight, but basically it's a video and it kind of goes over this position versus interest. When you have a position, there's that want. And so you have to figure out what is the want in order to get the interest, which is the motivation behind it. So many times, people might say, if my son doesn't get an aid, I'll take you to due process hearing. And what is the real motivation behind that? The real motivation is that the parent is concerned that her son does not have a one-on-one and he won't be able to stay on task. So just moving straight to, oh, we're going to do this, isn't, that's the motivation behind it, but taking that position might not be the best way to advocate. And there might be other ways that you can advocate for that one-to-one aid by not, saying we're just going to go to due process. Many times people say, I don't have to sign that form. Well, sometimes there are forms you do need to sign because that helps you with your procedural safeguards. And I'm going to show you those a little bit later too. But the motivation behind that is because you don't feel informed to sign it, right? You're not sure what you're signing. You're not understanding what that means if I agree or disagree. And if I do that, what's the next step that needs to happen? So, it's all about trying to understand what your positions versus interest is. And the video really gives you some really good a technique on what how you can utilize that, knowing what your motivation is and how you might be able to best advocate for it. So let me dive in a little bit more about identifying and clarifying your concerns. So it's really critical to identify your concerns and prioritize a few of them as well, because there might be a whole host of things going on, but it's probably best to prioritize them and really address those ones that are burning at first, because it makes the rest of the other ones, maybe flow a little bit better. And what I typically do, and what we do at the PEAL Center as a family resource specialist, because we have statewide, we have a couple family resource specialists right in Pittsburgh. Even though I'm in the Philadelphia area, our Pittsburgh family resource specialist couldn't do the presentation tonight, but I was available. So we're statewide, so we can all cover each other's territories. So, but just so you know, you do have local ones in your area, which sometimes is better because they know the districts. They sometimes know the who's who kind of thing and navigating that, like I'm in Philadelphia and I know how to I know sometimes how to better navigate the Philadelphia school district, where my Pittsburgh colleagues might not know and understand Philadelphia, because we're kind of like on this own little island. You know, while we're in Pennsylvania, I almost feel like we may not be in Pennsylvania. And I think my Pittsburgh colleagues have said that about the city of Pittsburgh as well. But we also serve all the other counties too. So depending on where you would live, it doesn't matter. We serve everyone. So prioritizing and planning is really important. And when you're doing this, it's really good to strategize. We at the PEAL Center really help a lot of families strategize for those IEP meetings, especially when you have a list of concerns. And we help you prioritize, we help you plan. It's also important to talk to a friend, a family member, a neighbor, anybody who you know has a vested interest in your child or just supports you in anything you do. It could be even a colleague of yours. You know, it's good to kind of talk it over with somebody else, you know, even with it, if in your own Down syndrome community. I know I get a lot of support within my local county where we have a Down syndrome group as well, talking it over with different family members, even not in the county, just some of the other surrounding counties. You know, I've been able to really think things through and get different opinions. So it's really good to kind of talk about that. And sometimes if you need help at those meetings, bring that person with you too. You know, they really need to do is take notes. Sometimes your professionals will behave better when, you know, there's just another person there, even though, you know, you'll introduce them as a friend or whatever, they still don't know what that friend's background is or anything, right? So it's nice that they're there to support you and or maybe take notes. And there's different ways to approach to different types of problem solving. You know, lots of questions. These are some of the questions I ask when I'm supporting families, like how important is that whatever their issue is, do we need to address it right now? Are there other things that might need to be addressed? What's their relationship with the school team? That's really important as well. Do you have one of those? I mean, I used to have like one or two people in my school building that would say, Diane, you didn't hear this from me, but you know, those people are your confidant kind of thing. They give you the pulse, you know, and maybe you have them, maybe you don't, but it's good to build certain relationships with different team members as well. And also thinking about, you know, is the concern special education or is it like an interpersonal concern? So, you know, is it really a special education concern, you know? And these would be things specific to the IEP, you know, maybe it's lack in progress, maybe it's behavior. You know, again, maybe it's the services that are happening, you know. I think some of the questions that came in were something about, you know, the child struggling in school. Well, it's the school's responsibility to educate your child. It's the school's responsibility to provide those services and support for your child to be successful. If your child's not showing progress, if your child is struggling, it is because the school is not doing maybe what they need to do, or maybe they need to bring in a different service, or maybe they need to bring in a different support. Just because your child maybe isn't on grade level or anything like that, you know, it doesn't matter. They can still be included with appropriate supports and services. And in the state of Pennsylvania, we have a ton of wonderful supports. We have what's called PATN, the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. Some of you may be familiar with them. They are the training arm in the state of Pennsylvania, and they have a ton of resources that they provide for the intermediate units and then also the districts themselves. And one of the biggest tools that they have right now in supporting students to be included, to make sure they have the supports and services. Hold on one second. Is something called the Framework for Access and Belonging, FAB, F-A-B. It used to be called the SAS Toolkit. And what that is an actual process that the whole team goes through, including the parent, and you look at what are the child's strengths, where they are academically, what are their needs, how can we include them into a particular, align the curriculum with the child's, you know, where they're at as far as they are academically and their different levels. How can we better support them? Do we need to modify the curriculum? Do we want them just to learn 3 big items, 3 main points of whatever the topic is that they're teaching? You know, it's a process. And that FAB process, that framework for access and belonging, is something you go through before you consider even removing the child into a different setting. So there's different techniques that can happen before you even do any of that. And or if they are already in maybe a different classroom, there's ways you can bring that to the table and maybe have them more included as well. So even though they may not be fully included, or there you can always have an IEP meeting and always discuss how can we better include my child. One of the questions talked about how their child really benefits from their peers, and that's really, really important. That's building those relationships. The issue is never the students. The issue is the adults, to be honest. The students are fine. They can do whatever, the students adapt. And actually, there is research around that whatever they do to adapt for your child that has a disability, no matter what their disability is, Down syndrome or anything else, helps the other students too, because there's usually other people who are struggling that probably could benefit from that different support or service that they're working on. But in the end, sometimes there are concerns around your IEP and different things that are happening that might not be resolved, and you might need to use your dispute resolution mechanisms. And I can get into them a little bit later too. They're really important to know and understand what your options are when you get to a standstill with your district. Now, that was special education concerns. What if it's an interpersonal concern? Special education supports and services may be implemented, but sometimes there are interpersonal challenges. Then your advocacy approach is very different. Sometimes resolving interpersonal concerns could include getting that paper trail, making sure you're doing that paper trail and going through the chain of command. So, if it is a, particular teacher or principal you're having an issue with, making sure that you're having a paper trail. Even if you have a phone conversation, I always say to the families, make sure you follow up with an email afterwards. Thank you for talking with me today. Here's what happened on the call. Let me know if I captured everything that we talked about. Making sure it's in writing. If you're having issues and the principal is giving you an issue, then you copy in the special ed supervisor, and then the special ed director. I mean, you can go through the chain of command if you need to. So knowing what that chain of command is important, so that you can better advocate for whatever you're advocating for. Now, interpersonal concerns usually are not resolved through the IDEA dispute resolution mechanisms. Sometimes it might be other ways that you have to deal with that. So I don't know that I might have enough. Let me check my time. Yeah, I want to make sure that I have enough time, but I do want to kind of go through maybe this first. I had 2 different scenarios, but maybe we can talk a little bit about this concern here. So, and if anybody wants to chime in the chat, I'm happy to help with that. So let's say your concern is about lack of progress on IEP goals. And your first question here is, what do I need to learn more about when there's a lack of progress? So where do you think you would need to learn about lack of progress in IEP goals? Where would you need to learn more about? Does anything jump into your mind where you could look for that? What do I need to learn more about? Anybody have any ideas or suggestions? So you can go to your progress monitoring data and compare it. You can go to and see how is the school measuring that progress, right? That's where you're going to learn more about your lack of progress in the goals, okay? It is that progress monitoring data. It is very important, that data, they're working on these goals, what is that? What does that data look like when you're measuring those goals? How often are they measuring it? How often are you getting the progress reports? I know sometimes they have to get into at least a minimum of school when you're getting your report cards. But if you want them sooner, if there's different things happening and you really feel like progress is not happening, then you can always ask for those progress monitoring ahead of time, maybe every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever you feel might be best. You can also ask for that progress monitoring in graphs, but sometimes it's better to actually see, is that line going up? Is it staying straight? Is it going down? So looking at it in a graph, sometimes asking them to graph it is more helpful as a visual as well. So when you're going into and you're thinking about the lack of progress in IEP goals, when I'm working with families, I say to them, what is your non-negotiable? So think about, what is your non-negotiable around lack of progress on IEP goals when you're thinking about it? Oh, I went down the wrong way. I wasn't sure where the next one was. So let's go. Where would I find it? Well, you could ask the teacher for the data and look at the homework and test. So it's the progress monitoring, data from the teacher, the homework, and any of the test. That's where you would find it. And then the non-negotiable would be, not making progress, not making changes if needed. I mean, if your child has not been making progress on a goal within a year, that's a problem, because then you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over thinking you're going to get a different result, right? They need to change the goals. The goals should be changing at least minimally in a year, because you're writing that IEP for a year. The idea is that they show progress within that year on that goal. And then what effective strategy or solution that could be used? Well, communication is going to be key. Having IEP team meetings, looking at it, reviewing the IEP as necessary, as needed. You do have to meet at least once every IEP term, but you can meet as many times as you want throughout the year. Now, I'm not going to go over scenario 2, but when you get the PowerPoint, you're going to see all this information in here answering all these various questions around that, thinking that the team members might have low expectations of your child, and then different strategies of what you can do around that advocacy. That's like another advocacy strategy that you can use. So let me talk about some process and strategies for educational advocacy. I'm doing okay with my time. All right, so I'm going to go. I talked a little bit about the vision already, and some of the other initial steps for preparing. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into practices that will increase the likelihood of successful educational advocacy. So knowledge, make sure you educate yourself. I was just on a call with a parent today, and I was helping her strategize for her IEP meeting. And after the call, I sent her a couple links. I sent her a couple attachments of things for her to start working on and knowing and understanding. She needed to better understand the actual IEP document, and they have what's called an annotated IEP, which is helpful, like what needs to be said in this section of the IEP, things like that. There's all kinds of wonderful websites out there. I'm going to go onto our website in a little bit and show you some of the things. I've already talked about Pattan, P-A-T-T-A-N. And then, of course, ODR, the Office of Dispute Resolution, is going to help you and guide you and knowing and understand what your rights are and if you want to exercise them. You're here tonight. You are getting your knowledge tonight, which is wonderful. That is going to be helpful as well, give you that knowledge. And it's recorded, so you can listen to it again if you need to. We also have some recorded webinars on our website as well. I'll do a little snippet of some of that too. Ask questions. There's never I don't know, this might be a dumb question, people. No, it's not, because a lot of times other people are probably thinking about it too. It's okay I ask questions all the time. No matter where I was always the first one up with my hand, even in different trainings, at the IEP meeting, I'm always asking questions. You're already with the group, so that's good. You're getting your knowledge here. Review your school's website. I tell families to do that a lot, especially if there's bullying. When bullying happens, first thing I say to families, what is the bullying policy on your school district's website? They have to have one, and they have to follow it. So that's the other key piece to that. And of course, call us at the PEAL Center. We can always, help you with any kind of knowledge that you're looking for and guide you towards that. Preparation, organizing your documents, planning, we do a lot of that at the PEAL Center, helping you figure out how you're going to strategize and talk at your meeting, prioritizing them, thinking and brainstorming about maybe some potential solutions, because yeah, you have issues, but maybe, it's strategizing and going to the table and saying, well, here's something I think might help. My child learns this way. Can we try this? Bringing solutions to the table is really important and will help you be a successful advocate at your meetings as well. And again, when you're on the phone with people, take notes, who you're talking to, what their title is. And again, follow up with an email with that person if you need to keep that paper trail, because documentation is really going to be important, and keeping those records is really going to be important, keeping things in writing. Because if at any time it does go to a point where you need to exercise your dispute resolution options, whether it be mediation or due process, where you're getting a lawyer, having these records, putting things in writing is really going to help your case and support you in that. Okay. So I don't know if anybody wants to share if there's a particular tool that you have found useful for yourself that you use. Maybe I know I listed a few on, oh, what happened? What did I do? On, I listed a few here as far as, what to do, but do any of you have a different tool that you might use around your strategies for advocating? Feel free to share that in the chat, and I'll be able to acknowledge that. Here are some tips for written communication. I know I've already went over a few of those already with you, but again, everything should be in writing. When you're making a request, make sure you're clarifying specifically what you are advocating for, what you really need or want, and make it clear. Ask for a decision. I'd like to hear from you by, and give them a date, or let me know within a week or a day or two, put a deadline on it so that, if you don't get something by this particular date, you're following up. Maybe you missed this and I was looking for an answer by this date, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's good to blind copy other people so that, whoever's helping you knows and understands what you're going through as well. You want to know oh, geez, what is going on here? Okay. Know the key players. So understanding the chain of command, why it's important, who do you need to talk to? There is a chain of command that's important. You can't just go straight to the school board if you haven't gone up the chain of the command, because the school board is going to go back down the chain of command to see what happened. And, they may look into it, but it's going to take longer. It's going to take much more time. That if you go through the chain of command, you can have that all in writing. I did this with the principal and it didn't work. I went to this one and did, giving all that history is going to be really important. Finding, what their names are, what their titles are, what their emails are, is really important as far as knowing the key players and making sure you're notifying them. Participating in meetings, it does take time. I mean, for me, like I said earlier, I said some not so nice things at a few meetings, and I had to learn from that. I wasn't, I wasn't always the best advocate for David, but as far as my approach, so I needed to learn how to listen, which was very hard for me, to really hear what they were trying to say and process it. I would hear something and I was always quick to responding, but I needed to learn how to really let things mesh a little bit, and that happened over time. So that was one of the things I had to learn. And some of you may already be good with that, and that's great. So that would give you a one up in the meetings. Now, this communication tips is on our website. It's a really nice guide in helping with the communication. This is the time where I'm going to go to our website to show you a little bit about the PEAL Center. We're on. Is this it? No, wait a minute. Sorry about that. Let me go. Okay, let's see here. All right. Now I'm going to reshare. There we go. Okay. All right. Yes. So here is our website. And I went straight to, I went up here to resources and I went straight to education and I went over here to educational rights because here is where a lot of the information around that dispute resolution is going to help you and understanding. You get the procedural safeguards, right? They hand you those procedural safeguards at the IEP meetings. And, they're very important because they tell you what your rights are, but they're also not always the easiest things to read. So on our website here, we have video vignettes to help you go through each of those procedural safeguards so you can better understand them in plain language. And it's a conversation between these two ladies going through each of your procedural safeguards. So feel free to visit our website. And if there's a certain something that you're not sure of, how do I get an independent educational evaluation? What does that mean? What does it mean to get my students' records amended? How do I file a complaint? What does that mean? What does mediation mean? And stay put, staying in the current program. And what happens when I go to a due process hearing? So and what happens around school discipline? So these procedural safeguards are all on nice videos for you to understand your rights. We also have some great newsletters and publications. And if you go to that section, you have some old newsletters that we used to do. Not sure that we've done one recently or not, but we have different rack cards. And when I talked about those communication tips, that brochure that I just showed you on my PowerPoint, this is where you click on the communication tips and you can get that brochure. Okay. We also have where you can request a training if you're involved in any other groups or you want the district to have, you can go to there and request a training from us. We have a webinar series and we have various topics. Positive relationships with young people is something new that we're starting. And I know that there was somebody else who sent in a question around transitioning your child, that I believe your child might be 18 or older and you're transitioning into adulthood. We have something here called Transition Tuesdays. This was a series of webinars that I participated in with a national leader, and we went through the transition process and broke it down in every piece for you to understand the whole transition process. And you can see, we talked about how youth and young adults drive their planning, how other agencies help with that transition process. What do transition assessments look like? So you can go through the various topics here and learn about transition. And of course, you can call us at any time. And just so you know, transition is one of my favorite things I love to talk about. And then the last thing I want to show you on our website is that we're having an inclusion conference, November 30th. Feel free to go on our website, get registered for it. It's going to be an amazing event. And we have a ton of information around inclusion. We're trying to build this next generation of inclusionists, of family members who, know and believe in inclusion. When your child's younger, that's where you need to start, when your child is younger. So we really encourage any of the younger families, to come to that conference and or just learn more from us at the PEAL Center about this. So I want to get a few more slides and then we'll open up for questions. Again, it's about coming to that common ground. How can we advocate and come to some common ground with the district? Here's just, a few things I always mention to families. You can stop the meeting at any time. If it's getting too much and emotional for you, stop it. Take a break. It's okay. Or you reschedule. It's okay to do that. You need to stay focused on your child's needs. I did talk about the dispute resolution. I'm not going to go through each one individually, but if you go to the Office of Dispute Resolution's website, They're going to go through all of them with you, and I can also at a later time help you if you need to. So we do have a survey. If any of you are able, I don't know what your electronics are at home. If you can, utilize the QR code that's on the screen to help us and answer our survey about the training this evening. I will also be sharing the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint will have the link to our survey. So when Masha shares everything with you, you can always participate that way if you don't mind, because we are federally funded. We have to let our funders know how we're doing and with that feedback. Here are some more resources. Some of them I talked about already earlier throughout the presentation. The links are there for you to go to these various resources. And then, of course, the PEAL Center is always there as a resource for you. And it just kind of gives you an overview. You can call us. You can go on our website and submit a request. And you can also just send us an email as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to just relook at these questions. And if anybody has a question right now, feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the chat. But I know there was a question around how do you determine whether the students perform better in self-contained, mainstreamed, or private education. A lot of those questions are really personal, family, and decisions, and what your vision is. I'm going to I tell every family, what's your vision for your child? What is that end result? We knew for David, we wanted him to be included as much as possible with the supports and services. We also knew we wanted him to stay in his community with his peers. So we knew we weren't going to go to another school somewhere if they were offering some other program. So we were ready to, advocate if we needed to, and they did. And one of the other questions here was about life skills. I think they did offer life skills. And while we didn't necessarily agree with it, they actually they had the life skills program in the school where David attended, but he didn't participate in it all the time. He visited it sometimes, but he didn't need that life skills all the time because education was still important. We didn't need him to learn how to make a bed or cook or anything like that because I taught him. We would teach him that at home. That was, when you're in school, you're being educated. His peers weren't learning how to do that. So why did David have to learn how to do that? So, but that was for us, so that's why I say sometimes those decisions are personal and family decisions, and you just have to, respect each other's decisions and whatever you need for having that vision. It's all about having that vision. Another question was about how much time is too much in gen ed classroom. My child is not able to do the classwork, but learns a lot from their typical peers, which is really important. There's a lot of good research about children learning from their typical peers. And it is the law. They do need to modify that curriculum for the child to be in that general education curriculum. So what is too much? Everything. I mean, I think every child should be included all the time. Like you'll see on our website, if you click on the inclusion link, there's some video, there is two new publications that we have, and there's some videos that we just had around inclusion. And these are national experts that talk about the research, that talk about how inclusion can work for every child. So I encourage all of you to go to our website and, learn more about what that could look like for you. One of the questions was about transition into high school, which I did. Hopefully that will answer some of your questions about the high school and what you need to learn about that and put into the IEP. And I'm also, we're also available to go through those transition sections of the IEP as well with you. And then the last question that was already submitted was something similar to being not on the same academic level as your peers. And I think I might probably answer that a little bit because I want to get to, I see there's one in the chat.